What Not Tales by Ada Mai Sharp. Alakazam, Alakazip. Chapter 1. Gremmy, the Gremlin. Twinkle lay on the floor beside a big globe. Slowly she turned the globe around and around with her finger. She looked at the yellow, green, pink, and orange patches that marked the different countries of the world, and at the blue patches that marked the bodies of water. Then she found the names of faraway countries to which her father had made trips in his airplane. Twinkle's little dog, Peppy, was asleep on the floor beside her. Mr. Blue, her pet parakeet, hopped up and down on the globe, following Twinkle's finger and crying, "Look! Look!" "The whole world looks topsy-turvy from here," said Twinkle as she turned the globe around and around. "This is the way it must have looked to Father when Gremmy the Gremlin had him flying upside down." Then Twinkle stretched out on her back and looked up at the small figure of a goblin that stood on the what-not shelf, a little away from the small wooden animal figures that she kept there. This little goblin was Gremmy the Gremlin, and a very funny little fellow he was. He had the body of a dwarf and the feet of a goat. He had a very short set of arms, but very long fingers. On one finger he wore a tiny gold ring. He even had wings, and above his ears there were two tiny horns that stood up beside his bright red hat. His eyes were large, and the corners of his mouth turned up in a mischievous grin. Twinkle's father had brought her this strange little goblin when he returned from his last trip to Africa. "When a pilot has trouble with his airplane," he told Twinkle, "he says that a gremlin, an unseen goblin, is making the trouble. No one has ever seen a gremlin, but people guess that a gremlin must look like this little goblin." Twinkle remembered the many stories her father had told her about gremlins. He had told her that one of his engines once stopped because a gremlin had put sand in it. He had also said that a bad gremlin had made the wing of his airplane fall off one day. He had told her, too, of another time a gremlin had almost made him have some trouble. He was flying upside down and almost crashed because he thought the sand below him was a cloud above him. As Twinkle looked at Gremmy, he seemed to wink his eye at her. The upturned corners of his mouth seemed to make his mischievous grin grow wider and wider. "You little troublemaker, don't you start any trouble with all my little what-not creatures," said Twinkle. Then Twinkle's eyes slowly turned to each little figure on the what-not shelf. There was the wooden squirrel that Tommy had brought her after his trip last summer. Near the squirrel was the little bear that her aunt had given her on her birthday. There was Bunny Boy, the flop-eared rabbit that she had bought at the fair last year. The figures were beginning to look a little dark now, but still Twinkle could see them. The squirrel, the bear, the rabbit, the frog, the fawn, the fox, the raccoon, the duck, the owl, the big-billed pelican, and the newest of all, Gremmy the Gremlin. Suddenly, Twinkle thought, "What is the matter? Everything is turning topsy-turvy." And that is when all the trouble began.